Discover the incredible journey of a medieval family surviving the life-changing cold of 1315. As the icy tendrils of winter wrapped their merciless grip around the small village of Hawthorne, the cries of children playing in the snow faded into echoes of despair. John Hawthorne, a farmer with hands like rough-hewn wood, scratched away at the unforgiving ground, each frozen clod reminding him of the meager harvests that had come and gone. He had built his life on sweat and toil, yet now his family's survival hung in the balance. Inside their modest home, flickering shadows danced on the stone walls, where his wife, Margaret, nursed their two children with a love stronger than the swirling cold outside. The village once throbbed with warmth and laughter, but now desperation seeped through its cracks. Neighbors who once whispered encouragement gathered around flickering fires, noses pressed to the flame, sharing dwindling rations. But as snow created mountains around homes, paranoia began to creep in. The frost turned friendships brittle. And among it all, their 17-year-old son, Thomas, dreamed of a future far beyond the encasing chill of farm life. Sparkling ambition glinted in his youthful eyes, longing for the city's promise that whispered tales of adventure and opportunity. "Father," Thomas declared one evening, voice quaking with emotion, "I want to leave this place. There's so much out there waiting for me. The city could give us—" "No," John's voice boomed like a clap of thunder. "What good is there in leaving? We have our land, our blood, our family. You want to chase shadows?" The air thickened with tension, Margaret watching helplessly as hope clashed with duty. She tried to interject, her heart aching as their worlds collided. As frost gathered like a shroud around them, so too did the division. Thomas, feeling stifled, envisioned a life of freedom, while John buried his fears beneath layers of hard-earned wisdom. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Just as whispers of looming storms stirred within the village, a child went missing, swallowed by the howling winds of the snowstorm. The village erupted in a cacophony of fear, igniting old grievances. Neighbors, once united, turned against each other, concocting accusations and mistrust in the desperate hunt. John felt a shudder of panic. He had already lost so much to the winter. Would his son be the next to vanish into the snow? As John searched for the missing child, his own world swirled in confusion. All he wanted was to protect his family, his community, his very essence. As he stood in the freezing wind, thoughts raged about what was truly important, ambition or loyalty, and where would Thomas stand when the snow settled? Hope flickered at the corners of his heart. Standing at the threshold of their frost-covered home, Thomas clutched a letter in his shaking hands. The city beckoned him with promises that shimmered like sunlight through the haze of winter. A decision loomed ahead, heavy with consequence. Amid the deepening chill, questions boiled beneath the surface. Would he answer the call of the unknown, leaving them all behind? Or would love for his family anchor him amidst the tempest? The winds howled like lost souls out in the night, their mournful cries bouncing off walls of ice and snow. John's heart raced as he combed through the thick flakes, squinting against the piercing chill. His breath came out in white puffs, the air heavy with dread. Every shadow twisted into something sinister. Every crackle of snow sounded like whispered fears. The child's face haunted him, her wide, innocent eyes now lost to the darkness. As he trudged forward, Other villagers joined the frantic search. They called out names, their voices carrying an urgency masked by desperation. "Here!" someone shouted from the tree line. John dashed towards the sound, his pulse quickened. But it was only Ella, a woman who had lived down the lane. Her face was as pale as the snow around them, and only panic filled her eyes. "I thought I heard a voice, John," she cried, her words laced with terror. "It's not just the cold that's taking our children. The shadows are creeping too," she continued, clutching her shawl tightly. John felt the icy tendrils of fear tighten around his heart. Fear was spreading like a vicious disease. Distrust had settled among the villagers, thinly veiled beneath shared grief. Each parent's sorrow was turning into suspicion, with fingers pointed and blame cast like stones. John turned away, anguish deepening within him. How could they hold together when the very fabric of their community unraveled? Back at home, Margaret held their children tight, whispering words of comfort while fear gripped her heart. She caught Thomas's eye, his youthful face a mixture of determination and despair. "Mother, we have to do something," he urged, a fierce spark igniting within him. "Let us help search for the child." Margaret's eyes widened. The world outside their door had transformed into a perilous place. But what if... She hesitated, her heart torn. This was their home, a refuge in a storm, not just from the bears of winter, but from the very shadows that now loomed over them. "I has to go." Thomas's voice settled with a firmness that surprised even him. "No, you're needed here." John's refusal thundered through their tiny home, the line drawn. Thomas's fire was a mirror to his father's worry. Like a conflagration against the frigid night, fire against ice. Both a necessity, both a threat. "You must care for your mother and siblings," John snapped. But deep down, he was afraid for Thomas's future, afraid he would go out and never return. But Margaret stepped forward, her voice steady and gentle as winter's breath could allow. "He must have the chance to find himself, if it means survival." "That's not survival," John roared. The pain in his chest became a raw ache. He could feel the ice settling in between Thomas and himself. "What if we could search together?" Margaret suggested, moving between them gently. "We need to be united to face the unknown. The call of the city is only worth answering if it brings us back together." For a beat, silence stretched between them, thick as the frozen air. Thomas's heart raced. He looked from his father's hardened expression to his mother's hopeful gaze. His dreams soared against the bleakness, battling against the cold despair creeping into their hearts. "What if I can find her and bring her home?" His voice trembled, still filled with the vibrant dreams of youth and the weight of growing responsibility. John's eyes flicked toward the door, the chilling winds howling outside. How long could they cling to hope, and how long could they stay entwined in fear? The moment weighed heavily, and only time would tell how they would choose to face this storm together. But as the wind howled anew, the town's shadows grew darker. In the treacherous depths of the night, the gripping question remained: would they emerge stronger, or would the cold divide them forever? John stood frozen in a moment of decision, the weight of Thomas's plea hanging heavily in the air. He could turn and argue more, dig his heels in against the winds of change swirling around them, but the resolve in his son's eyes pulled him in a different direction. Thomas wasn't just asking to venture into the dark, he was reaching for something greater. "I should go with you," John said, the words escaping his mouth before he could catch them. The shock hit him. Where had that thought come from? He glanced at Margaret. "We can't let him go alone." Thomas's eyes widened. "Really, father?" The flicker of hope ignited like a small flame against the oppressive chill filling the room. "Yes, you're right. We need to do something." John felt the heat of determination rise within him, pushing back against the cold fear that had gripped his heart. But if we go, we stick together. No one wanders off. Margaret sighed, a mixture of relief and anxiety washing over her. It's dangerous out there. But what choice do we have? John cut in, his voice steadier than he felt. The child could be out there, anywhere. He turned to Thomas, the bond of their shared love urging him on. We face this unknown as a family. The fierce winds outside continued their wailing, as if echoing their unspoken doubt. The snow held its own secrets. Shadows danced beyond their little home, and the trees loomed like ominous sentinels. They could feel it, the nameless terror pressing down upon them. "We'll need lanterns," Margaret said, her voice tinged with urgency as she hurried to gather what they would need. "And food. We have to be prepared for anything." As she packed small bags with bread and dried meats, Thomas moved closer to his father. He could sense the fight in John falter, the tension in him ebbing slightly. "I won't fail," he whispered, though he knew words were mere feathers against the weight of the world outside. The family worked together, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. They finished in haste, a quiet urgency motivating their hands. John took a moment to gaze at Margaret and Thomas, strong, resilient, his heart swelling with pride mixed with fear. No matter what shadows awaited them, he was grateful they were facing them side by side. With the preparations complete, they stepped outside into the biting wind. The cold sunk into their bones immediately, yet there was a warmth radiating between them. As they moved into the night, lanterns glowing softly, the shadows seemed to waver, but they pressed on together, their breath mingling decidedly with the flurry of snowflakes swirling around them. But as they entered the woods, the atmosphere thickened. Each whisper of the wind sounded like a distant plea. Each rustle in the brush felt like the weight of 1,000 eyes upon them. Thomas's heart thudded with exhilaration and fear. Was hope enough to shine against the shadows? In the stillness, John called out names, but not just the child's, the names of their lost neighbors, the last echoes of a community once whole. He felt every name like a prayer cast into the void, every voice a reminder of what they were fighting against. Then, suddenly, a shrill cry broke through the wind, a sound so sharp it cut through the frozen air. A scream. They froze, faces pale in the light of their lanterns. The realization struck hard. That sound had come from deep within the woods, where the shadows roamed the thickest. What had they stumbled into? They exchanged terrified glances. The night now more perilous than any had anticipated. There would be no turning back. Each of them felt it, the icy fingers of fear creeping in. They pressed forward, aware that perhaps the answers they sought were not merely hiding in the darkness. They could be facing the darkest parts of themselves as well. The woods were alive, and danger lurked just beyond their reach. But rather than quaking in fear, they took a breath, gripping their lanterns tightly. The real journey into the night was just beginning. As they ventured deeper, the chilling cry pierced the air once more, echoing a haunting call to the family. Would they find the strength to uncover the truth, or would darkness consume them? The sound lingered in the air, swirling around them like the frost on their breath. Each step deeper into the woods felt heavier, weighted by the unrelenting pull of dread. The trees stood like giants, their skeletal branches clawing at the dark sky above. John tightened his grip on the lantern, its flame flickering nervously, as if sensing the unseen danger lurking in the night. "Stay close," he whispered, not wanting to let the fear seep into his voice. There was a flicker of unease in Margaret's eyes as she inched nearer to him, her hand brushing against Thomas's shoulder. The bond of their quiet comfort shone like a beacon amidst the gathering gloom. "Did you hear that?" Thomas's voice trembled slightly, barely above a whisper. The tension was thick, the night alive with sounds that felt just outside their reach. A rustle to the right, a snap of twig. The woods seemed to breathe alongside them, a low growl thrumming in the distance. "Yes," John replied, squinting into the shadows. "But we have to keep moving." They carried on, the flickering light of their lantern illuminating patches of snow that crunched beneath their feet. Each crunch echoed like a drumbeat, reminding them of the urgency binding them forward. Another scream sliced through the silence. A flutter of panic shot through Thomas. "What if it's—" "Keep your mind clear," John interrupted, the sharpness of his tone echoing in the chilly air. It wasn't anger, but a desperate attempt to ground them all. They needed to focus. "We can't afford to think about what could be. We have to believe we're strong enough." Margaret nodded. "One step at a time," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Together." They pushed deeper still, hearts racing in unison, pausing now and then for John to call out again. Lost children, neighbors swallowed by the night. Each name a prayer, each shout an act of hope against despair. Then something shifted. The ground felt softer, almost like they were walking on a layer of mist. A cold breeze weaved through the trees, stirring up the echoes of other voices. It sent a shiver racing down John's spine. "Listen," Margaret urged, and silence fell heavy around them. Then the scream returned, not just an echo, but a call, desperate and closer than before. John and Margaret shared another glance, the fear mirrored in each other's eyes. Thomas took a breath. "I think we can help whoever's in trouble." His voice cracked, but held a courageous spark. "We can't turn back now. We're here, for a reason." "Right," John said, hesitating only for a moment, but the weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders. "We find out what that reason is." With that resolve, they pressed forward, the darkness feeling less suffocating somehow. They would rescue whoever was lost, regroup, and find a way back. As the lantern flickered again, they caught sight of a figure in the distance, a silhouette against the pale moonlight. "Do you see that?" Thomas gasped, pointing ahead. The figure twisted and turned, lost, vulnerable. "Stay behind me," John commanded. Stepping forward, the light of the lantern illuminating the path ahead with each tentative stride. But as they approached, the figure transformed from a shadow into something more tangible and dreadful than they could have ever anticipated. The air withered around them. What had they truly stumbled upon? Their breaths caught, hearts hammering against their ribs, the fear and adrenaline merging into a single desperate prayer that hope wouldn't be their downfall. The truth awaited them in the dim light, and they were no longer sure if it would lead them to safety or deeper into darkness. The figure stepped into the light, and what they saw chilled them to the bone. A young girl, no older than 10, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She looked up at them, wide-eyed and trembling, as if caught between her fear and the flickering glow of hope they offered. "Help, please." Her voice was barely a whisper, threaded with desperation. "Are you lost?" John asked, kneeling to be on her level, his heart aching at the sight. "I can't find my brother," she said, lifting a small hand to wipe her eyes with a dirty sleeve. "He was right here, but—" The girl's words hung in the air, heavy with anguish. "Where did you last see him?" Margaret stepped forward, carefully moving around John. Her maternal instinct surged up within her, pulling her closer to the frightened child. "By the creek," the girl replied. "He got scared when the wind howled. I told him to stay, but he ran away." "All right, we'll find him," John said firmly, though doubt gnawed at him. The woods were treacherous, and time was ticking away. "We're a team. We'll bring him back." Thomas stepped up, determination etching his features. "We can do this. Just lead us to the creek." The girl nodded and turned, her fragile form disappearing momentarily in the shadows as she began to pad away from the warmth of the lantern's glow. It felt wrong to follow a child into the abyss of that darkness, yet they had no choice. With one last look back at Margaret, they followed, keeping close to one another, hearts pounding as the woods warped around them. Branches reached out as if to grab them, and each sound seemed to whisper warnings. "Do you think he's all right?" Thomas asked, trying to lighten the mood, though his voice faltered against the wind's mournful wail. "Of course he is," John shot back, trying to convince himself as much as Thomas. "There's no telling how far he could have wandered. We'll find him." But the longer they walked, the more they were met with silence. The laughter of the child replaced by a heaviness that draped over them like an ominous fog. Margaret reached for the girl's small hand, her heart racing with the cold clamminess of fear. They reached a small clearing, where the murmur of water broke the stillness. "There!" the girl pointed, toward the creek, a shivering urgency. They saw the water dancing its way over stones, glimmering in the moonlight, but there was no sign of her brother, only the chilling rustle of leaves and the faintest echo of the wind. "We have to call for him," John said, panic creeping into his words. He turned, raising his voice into the stillness. "Hello? Can anyone hear us? Is there a boy out there?" "Jacob!" the girl cried out, her voice cracking. "Please come back." But only echoes replied. In their hearts, doubt blossomed. Was this foolish? Were they leading themselves into danger? As disquiet settled over them, Margaret noticed something glinting among the branches on the other side of the creek. A flash of color, perhaps a piece of clothing? "I think I see something," she cried out, anxiety tightening her throat. John's shoulders squared, and he started to stride toward the water. "Stay back," he ordered. But the sound of another scream shattered the night, raw and desperate, sending a jolt of terror through them. "Was that him?" Thomas asked, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Margaret whispered, her breath hitching in her chest. The night seemed to close in, and all that remained was a suffocating silence. What were they about to uncover on this haunting search? The darkness loomed heavy, and with it came the dawning realization that they were now trapped in something far more sinister than they had anticipated. The air was thick with dread, wrapping around them like a cold shroud. John stood at the water's edge, torn between his instincts to protect and the urgency to act. He felt the girl's small hand tightening in Margaret's grip, warmth fading as fear dug deeper into her heart. The scream had echoed through the woods, its haunting tone lingering longer than they wished. "Jacob!" John called again, louder, sending ripples across the dark surface of the creek. Silence answered him, heavy and foreboding. Thomas stepped alongside him, peering into the shadows that now seemed alive with threat. "We can't just wait here. We need to search both sides." His voice trembled slightly, but determination shone through the cracks of his fear. With a firm nod, John nodded, feeling that rush of adrenaline. "All right, let's split up. Thomas, you and Margaret go to the left side. I'll cover the right with the girl." "Aren't we stronger together?" Thomas questioned, concern flickering in his eyes. Margaret squeezed the girl's hand gently. "Sometimes we have to take risks to face the unknown. We'll find him faster this way," she said, her voice laced with assurance. The girl clung to Margaret, her body trembling. "Please don't leave me," she urged. "Never," Margaret replied softly. "We're a team. You stay with me, okay?" John felt a surge of courage as he stepped away from the group, the darkness swallowing him whole. With each step he took, the world around him felt unreal, twisted and distorted, like he was in a dream from which couldn't wake. "Jacob!" he called, his voice breaking the stillness again. The rush of water began to drown out his words, the creek now a living entity that mocked their search. A flutter of movement caught his eye across the bank. "Over here!" he shouted, rushing towards what looked like a torn piece of fabric snared on a low-hanging branch. But as he neared, panic washed over him. It was merely an old piece of plastic, glinting oddly in the moonlight. He felt his heart plummet to his stomach. He needed to stay focused. "Can you hear me?" he called out again, desperation coating his tone. "Jacob, if you can hear me, make a sound." His own breath quickened, the woods echoing with the weight of silence, each rustle of the leaves turning sinister. "John," he heard Margaret's voice, cutting through the tension. "We found something." He turned, heart racing back toward the sound. Margaret and Thomas were just ahead, standing rigidly with the girl between them, eyes wide as they pointed to something on the ground. "What is it?" John asked, joining them. Thomas crouched down, trembling fingers brushing against the earth. Nestled in the foliage was a discarded toy, a small, weathered truck. "It's Jacob's," Thomas breathed, stricken with realization. The girl gasped, her eyes filling with hope and heartbreak. "That's his." John's chest tightened. "We're close. We can't give up." But uncertainty loomed as a new sound shattered the stillness, a low growl rising from the depths of the forest. They turned toward the darkness as dread swirled in their minds. Something unseen was lurking just beyond their sight. "What was that?" the girl whimpered. They stood frozen, hearts pounding, as the growl broke into the night again, closer this time. The air shifted, thick with anticipation and fear. Something waited for them in the shadows, and the realization of what they might face left them teetering on the brink of terror. What had they stumbled into, and would they find Jacob before whatever was lurking could strike? The darkness closed in like a living thing, and the growl echoed ominously through the trees, its source unseen but palpably threatening. John's heart raced, each beat vibrating in his ears as fear coursed through him. He turned to see the fear mirrored in Margaret's eyes, a reflection of the fragility they now faced. "Stay close," he urged, stepping toward the sound, sensing the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The girl's grip on Margaret's hand tightened, her small body trembling as she pressed against the older woman, seeking solace in her steady presence. "What do we do?" Thomas whispered, glancing around, his voice edged with panic. John swallowed hard, his mind racing through the dark possibilities. "We can't let whatever it is distract us from finding Jacob. We keep going, even if we have to face it." "But what if?" the girl started, her voice barely a whisper, but John could feel the fear hanging in the air. The air, thick and tangible. "Nothing will happen to any of us," Margaret insisted, her tone brusque yet soothing. "We're stronger together. Trust each other." With a nod, John summoned every ounce of courage he had and took a step forward, deep into the thicket of the woods. He held his breath, eyes scanning every shadow, ready to react at the slightest movement. "Jacob!" he shouted again, his voice echoing against the trees. "Answer us!" The growl snarled once more, low but unmistakable, sending chills racing down his spine. He forced himself to move, feeling the weight of anxiety pull at him as he crossed the boundary of the path into the denser underbrush. The sounds of the night enveloped him, the rustling leaves whispering warnings he couldn't ignore. "John!" Margaret called from behind. He could sense her worry, could almost feel the collective anxiety pulling at them like a taut string. "We can't go too far without each other." But every moment felt precious, stealing away opportunities to find Jacob. He pushed deeper, focused solely on the urgent need driving him forward. "I have to find him," he murmured to himself, more determined than ever. As he moved further in, the sounds around him shifted. Gone were the gentle rustlings of the night. Now it felt electric in the air. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He spotted something up ahead, faint in the shadows but unmistakably human-sized. "Jacob!" he shouted, the name an incantation against the looming darkness. He rushed towards it, and his heart soared, hope lighting him up. But as he got closer, dread gripped his chest once more. The figure wasn't Jacob. Instead, it was a tangle of branches, twisted into a cruel imitation of a child's form, silhouetted against the cold moonlight. Panic replaced hope, and despair clawed at him, threatening to pull him under. "John!" Margaret's voice broke through, closer than before. "We're coming! We have to regroup!" he shouted back, his voice desperate as fear rose in his throat. He felt the growl within reach, sensing its presence like a predator stalking unseen. The woods were coming alive, shadows stretching and shifting unsettlingly. Every twist of a branch felt like a whisper of something watching, waiting. Would they find Jacob in time? Would they face whatever it was hiding in the dark? As the three drew closer, a roar erupted from the underbrush, so loud it felt like the very ground shook beneath their feet. They all froze, terror crashing down like a wave. What lurked in the shadows, and how could they keep moving forward when the very air seemed to pulse with danger? The night was far from over, and time was slipping away. John's breath caught in his throat as the roar reverberated through the trees, a sound like the thunder of a storm breaking loose. Instinctively, he spun around to see Margaret and the children behind him, breathless and wide-eyed. The fear was palpable, bubbling over in the tension that had settled around them. "Run!" he shouted, the command bursting out of him. His heart raced, some primal urge urging him to flee, but he knew he couldn't leave them. Not now, not like this. Margaret grasped the girl's hand tightly, tugging her forward, her eyes darting in every direction. "This way," she called, the strength in her voice somehow cutting through the heavy darkness, even as they hesitated. "Where's Jacob?" Thomas cried, his little voice cracking with fear, a mirror image of uncertainty reflecting in John's own heart. "I don't know," John yelled back, trying hard to push the worry aside. "We need to keep moving." He felt a surge of protectiveness flooding through him, sharpened by the anxiety that gnawed at the edges of his mind. They stumbled through the thicket, branches snagging at their clothes. John strained his ears, hoping to catch the slightest sound, a hint of Jacob's voice, anything that might lead them to him. The presence roaming the woods felt closer, the underbrush rustling uncomfortably, as if it bore witness to their fear. "John!" Margaret's voice broke in, sharper this time. "We have to stick together." He turned to see her steadying the girl, whispering calming words in her ear. It struck him then, a tether of hope, of unity amidst this dark chaos. "You're right," he admitted, nodding to her. "Let's find some cover. We can't let it corner us." They stumbled upon a small clearing, oddly serene against the terrifying backdrop of the night. The moonlight pooled into the space, illuminating an old, gnarled tree that offered some shelter. "There," John pointed, "we can hide behind that." As they rushed forward, the growl emerged again, closer this time, vibrating through the ground beneath them. It felt like the air had been sucked out, replaced by icy fear. John wanted to scream, to demand Jacob's safety, but all he could do was steer the group into the hollow of the tree's roots. "Is it gone?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling against the stillness. "Not yet," John murmured, trying to steal a glance back to the darkness from which they came. The silence stretched painfully, each second heavy with suspense. Then, to their horror, the outline of a massive creature emerged from the shadows, fierce eyes glinting in the moonlight. It was a beast, larger than anything John had ever seen, with gnashing teeth and fur that bristled with a life of its own. The air filled with its growls, echoing like a haunting melody. "Stay quiet, don't move," John instructed, pressing himself against the cold bark of the tree, heart thundering in his chest. The beast prowled, sniffing, searching, and for an agonizing moment, John locked eyes with it. And in that instant, he felt the creature's hunger, its primal need for something he dared not name. What did it want? Where was Jacob? Would they survive the night? Suddenly, a terrified scream pierced the air. A familiar voice, calling out, filled with desperation. "Jacob!" John shouted instinctively, the horror and realization sinking deep. But the beast turned sharply, drawn to the sound. With adrenaline pumping, John faced his companions. "We have to go, for Jacob!" As they dashed toward the call, the creature's roar echoed behind them, a stark reminder that time was running out, that danger was now a part of their reality. The forest, once a labyrinth of shadows, transformed into a battleground. Straining to hear more, they raced through the darkness, hearts racing, hopes waning. They had to find Jacob before it was too late. But could they confront the terror that stalked them and live to tell the tale? The darkness pressed in on them, suffocating and thick, every rustle in the bushes sending chills down John's spine. "Fight through it," he urged, feeling the grip of fear tighten around his throat. They needed to be brave, for Jacob. "Why did he have to scream?" Margaret whispered, her voice barely more than a breath, filled with despair. John's heart sank. Each word dripped with pain, weighing them down. They had to hold on to hope, no matter how dim it felt. "Stay close," John barked, pushing forward through branches that snagged and scratched at their skin. The underbrush crackled beneath their hurried steps, limbs flailing wildly in a desperate dance of survival. "Just a little further." Thomas clutched the girl's hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He might as well have been clutching onto life itself. "What if we don't find him?" he whimpered, a tremor in his voice that shattered John's nerve. "We'll find him," John shouted, words bursting out wrapped in determination. "We have to believe." In the shadows, he could see Margaret's eyes, a mixture of fear and strength, holding on to the fragile thread of hope. They all needed that right now. They needed each other. Suddenly, a sound cut through the darkness, a desperate cry, almost muffled. "Help, please!" It was Jacob. The mere sound sent a rush of adrenaline through John. He could feel his every nerve ablaze, each heartbeat a countdown. "There, it came from that direction," John pointed, already turning toward the sound, his instincts roaring to life. The beast's growls echoed ominously around them, its presence a shadow looming closer, but he couldn't stop, not now. "John," Margaret's voice stitched through his dots, tightening with worry. "It could be a trap." "Jacob needs us," he replied, a wildness in his voice, the thought of losing his son giving him strength. "We have to try." They broke into a sprint through the trees, limbs clawing at them as they tore through the ferns. John could feel the weight of dread pressing against him, but Jacob's voice was their guiding star. They ran until breathless, until their lungs ached, and the world around them faded to nothing but the rhythm of their heartbeat. "Jacob!" John called out, desperately, each sound ricocheting through the branches like a prayer. "We're coming!" Up ahead, the brush began to thin, a hint of light breaking through. Could it be a clearing? His heart quickened, hope coursing through his veins. But before they could break free, a deafening roar erupted, sending shock waves through the ground beneath their feet. The creature had found them. "Run!" John bellowed, a sudden urgency flooding him. The beast lunged out of the shadows, its massive form brushing against the trees. It was closer now, teeth bared, fierce eyes swirling with primal instinct. "Take the kids!" Margaret shoved the girl toward him, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "I'll distract it. Find Jacob." "No!" John shouted, horror gripping him. "We move together. Go, now!" she asserted, a fierce resolve that made his stomach twist. With no time to waste, John grabbed the kids and bolted toward the light, fear and determination colliding inside him. The last thing he saw was Margaret turning, defiance forged in her stance. As they stumbled into the clearing, the moonlight revealed a horrific scene, a match between survival and sacrifice as the beast pursued. Heart racing, John held the kids close, praying he hadn't made a terrible mistake. The clearing whispered promises of safety and danger all at once. They had escaped the immediate grasp of the beast, but it was not far behind. "Jacob," he cried out, desperation clawing at him. "Where are you?" Would they find him alive? Would Margaret return to them? In that instant, clarity hit. Survival was not just about escaping the beast. It was about love. And love drove them forward, into the unknown, a daunting path that led deeper into darkness and possibility. With the haunting growl echoing in his ears, John pressed onward, a family tethered together by hope, racing against time. What awaited them amidst the shadows? Would they find Jacob before the night consumed them all? The moon hung high, casting a silvery glow over the treetops as John raced through the clearing, with Thomas and the girl still clutching his arms. Panic surged through his veins, battling against the instinct to flee deeper into the forest. His heart hammered like a war drum at the thought of Jacob lost in the dark. "Jacob!" he shouted again, voice jagged with desperation. The sight of the clearing seemed to warp under the pressure of his dread, the shadows around the edges of the light creeping closer, threatening to swallow them all. "Daddy," Thomas whispered, squeezing his hand tighter, his small body trembling. "Stay strong," he said, a fierce resolve igniting in him. "We have to find Jacob together." Ahead, the underbrush quivered, just beyond the shattered remains of a fallen tree. John motioned to the kids, urging them forward. They turned the corner, the darkness around them thick and portentous. At last, above the rustle of leaves, came a voice, a soft, trembling whimper. "Help, please." "Jacob!" John's heart soared as he dashed toward the sound. He cleared the last of the thicket, bursting into a small glade filled. There, against the backdrop of twisted roots and ferns, he saw his son. Jacob was curled up under an ancient tree, shivering but alive, eyes wide with fear. Relief flooded through John, a wave of joy washing over him like sunlight breaking through after a storm. "I'm here! I've got you!" As he rushed to pull his son in a tight embrace, the two boys crashed together, the warmth grounding John, banishing any lingering shadows of fear. Thomas rushed to join them, relief brightening his features. "Jacob, we were so worried!" Thomas exclaimed, enveloping his brother in an embrace. The warmth of family wrapped around them, but the sense of danger had not dissipated. Suddenly, the horrifying growl shattered the stillness once more. The massive creature had followed them into the clearing, its eyes glinting like dangerous stars. John's heart sank as he felt the sharp edge of terror crawl back into his chest. "Run! Everyone, run!" he shouted, grabbing both boys. They darted toward the edge of the clearing, driven by unyielding instinct, adrenaline coursing through their veins, but no plan in mind. The beast moved faster, a tremor in the ground under their feet, a harbinger of what loomed behind them. John glanced back just as the creature lunged, snapping its jaws barely an inch away. He felt the boy's fingers tighten around his own. "Towards the trees! We need to find a way back to—" Before he could finish, the beast blocked their path, letting out a deafening roar that rattled through John's bones. It was as if the forest itself were shaking in response. "Wait!" Margaret called out from somewhere deeper in the shadows. There she was, emerging from the undergrowth like a fierce guardian, striking a brave stance against the creature. "Over here!" she yelled, waving her arms as she stepped protectively between the family and the beast. "Margaret!" John shouted, a swell of relief flooding through him. "Go, get the boys to safety." "No!" John cried, panic surging again. Yet it was all happening too fast. Without thinking, he responded to his wife's determination. Because that was their bond, to protect one another while fighting off the encroaching shadows. With one last desperate glance, he steered the boys into the trees, pushing through the jagged brush, heart racing as they dove deeper into the safety of the woods. They could hear the battle behind them, the roars and shouts, but there was no time to dwell on fear. "Keep running, boys. Keep your heads down." They stumbled forward, weaving through the trees. It felt like a lifetime before they skidded to a stop in a dense thicket, huddled together against the trunk of a giant oak. The distant sounds became muffled, a hazy echo of a struggle, fading into the sanctuary of the woods. "Are we safe?" Jacob whispered, fear glimmering in his wide eyes. "For now," John promised, his heart still racing. "We need to find a place to wait until we can—" "No, we can't leave her," Thomas insisted, fists clenched in determination. John's heart wrenched at the thought. "I know, but we can't help her if we don't make sure of our safety first. We regroup, just like we planned. We can't be reckless." And just like that, the quiet here felt so fragile, the night returning to its cloak of shadows. Yet, amidst the fading sounds of the battle, a gentle stir against the air made John's heart ache anew. Then, from the other side of the thicket, a figure emerged slowly. It was Margaret, her clothes torn, but alive and resolute. "Margaret!" John gasped, rushing forward to embrace her, Jacob and Thomas bubbling with joy behind him. "I'm okay," she assured them, breathless but safe. "I managed to distract it long enough for you to escape." The family huddled under the canopy of the ancient oak, the warmth of love igniting amidst the lingering chill of the night. They had faced fears and shadows together, while the world outside seemed relentless. "Now we have to find a way out of this forest," John said, a gleam of determination igniting once more. The family united, strength rising within them like a roaring flame. They could face the darkness together. They could find Jacob's safety and reclaim the light that had dwindled through the night. Somehow, they would not just survive, they would thrive. With resolve burning in their hearts, hand in hand, the Hawthorne family stepped back into the night, ready to face the dangers ahead, not just as individuals, but as a beacon of unity against the shadows. They were not defeated, they would conquer. And in that moment, they understood. It was not just about survival. It was about love, family, and the light that could guide them home. Now that you've witnessed their incredible transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the journey we've taken together. And comment below your reactions and feelings about this ending. Your thoughts matter. Don't wait, not even one more second, to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this transformation too. This is the moment to show your support.